Joining us in the studio is Jerrold Kessel. Good morning, Jerrold.
Good morning, Jerrold.
Now, we've heard this morning reports just come in, at least 50 Lebanese civilians killed in Kafr Kana in South Lebanon this morning. First of all, Jerrold, how long is this going to continue, do you think?
Well, this tragedy now in Kafr Kana could change the circumstances dramatically. There seemed to be implication that although the diplomatic clock was ticking considerably faster over the last couple of days since President Bush met with Tony Blair in Washington, and the Security Council is due to begin meeting on Monday, that a ceasefire would eventually materialize. The tragic events and the carnage now in Kafr Kana could very much accelerate that process, and whereas in the past it could have been that a ceasefire might have only materialized once all the blocks in the diplomatic puzzle were in place, it could be that those voices calling for a immediate ceasefire, immediate halt to hostilities, will now have their way and will make sure that Israel is forced to stop its military activity at this stage.
Now, you say Israel will be forced to stop its activity. You're saying that Israel bowing to US pressure, so this is a US game being played out in the Middle East now, you're saying?
Well, it's quite dramatic that this is the first time that Israel has been involved in military action in a war or lesser military action where it hasn't really operated with a stopwatch in mind of the international stopwatch, often operated by the United States. This time the United States has given Israel a leeway in terms of time to conduct what it deemed to be the correct and legitimate military operations against Hezbollah. But the United States has been under pressure of its own sort from outside, from Europe in particular, from within the Arab world, its allies in the Arab world, to get a ceasefire in place. And this action might very much compel the United States to adopt a different policy of reversing the diplomatic process to the extent that first a ceasefire comes into place and then they get the different blocks, other elements of the diplomatic arrangements which they're aiming for in place, for which Condoleezza Rice is in the area at this moment. It could turn things on their head. It's not altogether certain, but the pictures and the terrible bloodshed that there has been, it seems, in Kafr Kana could force things in that direction.
Now, Jerrold, one of the important questions for both sides here, for Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah and for Prime Minister Olmert, is how can they both leave this without losing face, and how can that happen?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is the interesting thing here is both who won the war in a sense, but not only that, also who wins, if not the peace, at least the settlement, who's on top. Now, with regard to the war, you're right to suggest anyway, that the Hezbollah could come out of this at least claiming, if they may claim victory, at least looking like they secured a tie militarily with Israel, which would not altogether be damaging to, for instance, Israel's objectives in securing the kind of diplomatic settlement that it hopes to secure, with not only with the help but certainly under the guidance of the United States. So the big question then becomes not so much saving face, but whether objectives can be secured through the diplomatic avenue. And then the question that enters is who wins the settlement, and the battle there is not so much between Israel and Hezbollah, but between Hezbollah and the Lebanese government. Will the Lebanese government be able to be the force which will carry weight on the Lebanese side of the equation, or will Hezbollah be the ones who will be able to say to the international community that we do not agree to this, that, and the other in the diplomatic arrangements that you are suggesting. We do not agree to the nature of the diplomatic forces you are suggesting. Or will the Lebanese government have the strength have the ability, both domestically within Lebanon and within the Arab world, to say, we are going to decide, we will accept these terms or will not accept these terms. In other words, the victory is ours. That means that the terms of the agreement, which Condoleezza Rice is now just beginning to put to the parties in the region, are very critical of whether they will be acceptable, not so much to Hezbollah, but to the Lebanese government, and whether the Lebanese government has the power to win over and prove itself to be the victor on the diplomatic front. I think it is important. Israel will certainly not allow will not agree to or not acquiesce in any agreement which does not include the release of the 2 kidnapped soldiers. That's absolutely sure. But I think beyond that, this whole war is of much greater consequence. One doesn't want to say that with regard to the lives of soldiers or the lives of any of abductees, but still it has a broader dimension. The dimension seems to be and it's no accident that Tony Blair and George Bush put their cards on the table when they set the diplomatic clock running in serious motion on Friday, that they put it in the context of the new Middle East, of a broader settlement, of the broader principles of a settlement. And I think that's what we're watching being played out at this moment. The possibility that that this diplomatic arrangement that comes into play at the end of this war, whenever that happens, sooner or later, has ramifications which go way beyond the question of the return or non-return of soldiers or release of Lebanese prisoners. It is literally about the shape of the Middle East, I would say, or the battle for the future of the Middle East, whether it's the United States dominated or moderate Arab countries dominating the shape of the Middle East, or is it Hezbollah and Iran who are calling the shots and saying this is the kind of instability that we want to see in the Middle East? That seems to be on the table now. How it will shake out in the diplomatic process, too early to tell, because we're just beginning that diplomatic process.
So one final question, Jerrold. Israel's deterrent factor, does it stand up now? How good a shape is that in?
I think there's one very dramatic thing that's happened in this war, and that's also just in its incipient phases with regard to deterrence. I think there is an element certainly that Israel had to go to war. It felt it had to go to war because it couldn't allow either the abduction of its soldiers or the continued presence, the continued threat of Hezbollah on its borders. And that has been alleviated, presumably, if the soldiers are returned, if Hezbollah is dismissed from its dominant position right on the border and its ability to call the shots at any stage. In that sense, Israel's deterrence has been restored to a good deal. There has to be an admission in Israel, and I think there is an admission, that no longer is it possible to win dramatically asymmetric wars. In other words, when you're fighting against a guerrilla force such as Hezbollah is, whether it's terrorist or not, doesn't matter. Its shape is guerrilla. The very difficult situation of restoring absolute deterrence, to say we will do this, and when we choose to do this we will be able to secure our objectives. Israel is living with that, is coming to terms with that new realization, you could say, which the United States and the Western powers are coming to terms with in Iraq and elsewhere. There's the element that's coming into play that has never been in play before about Israel's deterrence, that Israel is accepting that as part of its deterrent stance is not only its self-reliance, that if there is an effective international force on its borders, on the other side of Israel's border, in this case with Lebanon, that could be part of Israel's deterrent capability, if it is based on the legitimacy of Israel's right to strike at any, which was the case in this war. Israel went to war based on the legitimacy of its case that it was striking against a provocation on its sovereign territory. If the result of that war means the international community is going to ensure that there will be no more such strikes across Israel's border, then Israel will factor in that international force, a force with teeth, one presumes, into its deterrent array. And that is a dramatic change in Middle East politics and in the question of what is deterrence.
Well, there, Jerrold Kessel was telling us about what looks like to be a new Middle East on the horizon. Who knows? Well, thank you very much anyway for joining us in the studio. Jerrold Kessel, thank you very much.